Automation. All right, moving things along. So this is Fred from, he was at Google for 10 years. He now runs a magnificent company called Optimizer. I have banged on a lot about Optimizer in PPCSavvy. I won't do that here. But in a couple of conversations with Fred, we talked about a strategy that he's employed at the agency he was involved with, SalesX, which he calls bid buckets. And essentially what we're doing here is we're putting every single keyword in our account into one of a number of bid buckets. The idea being that these buckets are mutually exclusive. In other words, the keyword can only be in one bucket at a time, and therefore only one bid change applies to that keyword at a time. And as the data changes, as the performance changes, a keyword might get picked up and moved from one bucket to another, and then different rules apply because it's in a different bucket. So this is really borrowing from the share trading environment of a portfolio-based approach. So you're saying rather than bidding individual keywords all separately, we're saying lump these 125 keywords together, let's put them in the same bucket in over here, and let's apply the same rules to everything in that bucket. So for this portfolio of keywords over here, let's treat these like this. For this bucket over here, let's do this. So I think this is a really, really smart way to approach bidding. So full credit to Fred and his team for this. So a couple of examples of what those rules, what those buckets might be. So if we're below first page bid and quality equals 1, then do X. If we have 0 conversions, but a high spend, and I'm going to use high here rather than a particular number because it's obviously going to depend for you. If your CPA target is $20, then a high spend might be $40, $50, $100, again, depending on your risk tolerance, depending on how long you're prepared to let this run to gather data. If your CPA is currently $150, then high, generally for me, high is at least double my average CPA. So if I've been running at $150, I can't freak out when I get to $160 with no conversions because I don't yet have enough data. If the next click converted, I would be right about average. But if I've been running at $150, by the time I get to $300, I'm pretty certain that this is a bad keyword. And even if the next click is a conversion, it's now converting at half the average. I don't have enough data yet to be statistically significant, obviously, but in the real world, with real dollars, I'm not going to wait until I'm 99% certain of anything. I'm certainly not going to wait until I'm 99% certain that that was a crap keyword and that I shouldn't have been bidding on it all this time, because I'm going to waste an awful lot of money if I do that. Another rule might be if I've got this range of a number of conversions. So in other words, if I've got multiple conversions on this keyword and a great CPA, again, relative to your average and whatever great means for you for that particular account, then do Y. Bid up, probably in that case. And so with Fred's help, I came up with this decision tree, which he shared in a couple of his presentations, which is quite lovely of him. So let's walk through this. Now, I'm not saying copy this. I want to be very, very clear. I'm not saying copy this. I am saying that this is one way to think about the mutually exclusive bid buckets, which are obviously all of the nodes on the tree, if you like, over on the far right. Now, this is probably more complicated than it needs to be. But when we started digging into it, we started thinking about our rules and we started thinking about why do we change things, it was pretty obvious that there are a bunch of rules that you follow. And I know Fred with SalesX, they narrowed it down to around about a dozen or so bid buckets. I've got a little bit more than that here, and the latest revision of this, we have a few more. Anyway, so we'll start, and you'll notice what I'm doing at each point in the decision tree is I'm splitting into mutually exclusive buckets, but I'm picking on one metric at a time. So the first metric I'm looking at is impressions. And a question came up when I did this webinar originally, which was, does this mean that you're setting all bids of 0 impression keywords down to 0? I'm definitely not saying that. I'm just saying if I were to run this as a script, which is why I'm doing this, which is why I'm breaking these into mutually exclusive buckets so that I can run some automation on this, probably as a script. And by the way, there's a script in Optimizer where you can apply rules like this, which is very, very good of Fred to have written that script. All I'm saying is that for my 0 impression keywords, I'm just going to ignore those for now. Particularly for large accounts, I've got a 30-minute limit on my script. To get through everything I need it to get through, I'm just saying let's just ignore, for now, 0 impression keywords. I might have a second script that runs and looks for 0 impression keywords and bumps the bid up a little bit. Maybe, who knows. I'm just saying for the sake of time here, let's continue only with keywords that have some impressions. Then I'm going to look at the first page bid estimate. If my bid is currently below that, we jump up to the top here and we say, okay, now let's split by quality score. And again, I'm not putting absolute numbers on this because it depends for you, for your particular situation. For a brand campaign, a low quality score might be a 6. For a regular non-brand campaign, low might mean 3, or you might only want to apply this to the 1s and 2s, but I've said if it's below first page bid and low quality score, flag those keywords to be fixed later. So we might, for instance, apply a label to those that says low QS and low FPB fix. And then somebody else can go in, or you can go back into the account later on and fix those. So let's ignore the quality score stuff because we're saying if quality score is high, then we might bid those keywords up because they're below first page bid, but everything else looks fine. Let's bid those up. Let's continue down the bottom. Let's assume they were above first page bid. So the next split then is, has this keyword ever converted or not? If we have not converted, no conversion data, then we're going to need to use spend. In our example here, if we haven't spent much on this, bid it up. If we've spent more than the average, but not loads and loads, maybe just nudge the bid down a little bit because it looks like this isn't going to work. If we've spent loads of money on this and it's never converted, then we definitely want to bid that down. You could add additional rules there where if it's too high, if it's really high, you might want to pause that keyword rather than just gradually bidding down. Depends again on your risk tolerance. These are not rules set in stone. Please do not blindly copy these rules. Please use whatever rules make sense for you in your account. So assuming that we do have conversions, I always say to the guys that we can't do anything with the 111s. So 1 impression, 1 click, 1 conversion. Can't do anything with those. So single conversions, I would tend to, in the real world, I would tend to ignore. But if we're going to have some automation, let some scripts run on this, then we might choose to change the bid with those single conversions. You may or may not. If we move down to the next section, then I'm saying, well, okay, we've got a couple of conversions, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got a few conversions starting to happen. Now we want to, if we're, so low, medium, high, by the way, the guide for that obviously is down the bottom left there. And again, this will change account to account and even change based on the campaign that you have in your account. Again, the most obvious being your brand campaign versus one of your non-brand campaigns. And the target CPA in those two different campaigns are likely to be very, very different. And therefore, what low or medium or high means in that context is going to be different. Back to 2 to 5 over here. So I've got a few conversions happening at this keyword. I've got a low CPA, it's less than my target, and therefore I want to bid that up. Here's an outlier. It's converting really well. It's converting for $10. My target was 20. Let's bid some more. Google, I want more of that, please. Get the impression share up, get the position up. I'm happy to spend more on that because it's lower than my target. If it's right around my target, then if I'm being aggressive, I may choose to bid that up. Other people wouldn't. Other people, as soon as that goes above the target CPA, they'd say, no, I'm not spending any more money on that at all. And you might choose to have that medium band, if you like, be no bid change at all. And on the newer version of this, I now have 5 bands. So I've got very low, low, right around target, high, very high. So the improvement of this, but that makes for a very, very messy slide and very, very unreadable. But on that, we're using the 5 bands, that middle band of right around target CPA, I make no bid changes. And so essentially what you get is this if you were to think about CPA for a particular entity over time, you're probably going to see something that sort of oscillates up and down a little bit. It runs cheap for a while, you bid more, you bid more, you bid more. Oh, now it's running expensive. You bid less, you bid less, you bid less. It's coming down again. Oh, yep, now it's cheap again, so you bid more. And eventually you're sort of hoping that line sort of flattens off in that middle band eventually over time. And eventually you'd love all of your keywords to be sitting in that middle band right around target CPA. And you're not having to change the bids on those once they get there. But if CPA is too high, you're going to bid it down. If it's too low, which is a good thing, hence green, you're going to bid it up. And so on and so on. Again, please don't use blindly, but that hopefully will give you a start, because when Fred talked about his bid buckets, there was no visual around that. There was no example. So I put that together, and then Fred was kind enough to spend an hour or two walking me through some ideas, and we refined it a little bit. So the first paid bid stuff was all his. So I'm very, very grateful to Fred for spending that amount of time, because very, very few people on the planet know more about the inner workings of the AdWords system than he does, having spent 10 years on the AdWords team at Google. Right. Still got a little way to go. Thank you for hanging in here. We've got Conversion Optimizer, then we'll talk about bid adjustments and a little bit about Savvy Number. So good on you. I may end up splitting this video into 2, so this is getting a little longer than I was expecting at this point. But I hope you're finding it useful. Conversion Optimizer. How is Conversion Optimizer different? Well, essentially, so this is a campaign level setting. So the only difference between Conversion Optimizer and Target CPA, flexible bid strategy, is that CO applies to the entire campaign. Conversion Optimizer is CO. Target CPA can apply to individual ad groups. That's the only difference between the two. Other than that, they work exactly the same. I had to ask 7 people at Google to find out the answer to that question. CO, as does Target CPA, ignores all of your bid modifiers, or your bid adjustments. The only one it takes into account is if you've got mobile turned off, i.e. you've got your bid mod set to -100%. So all of those bid mods that you've carefully crafted over time for device, location, time of day, and RLSA, it's going to ignore those bid mods and do whatever it wants to your bids. It will take into account that somebody is on your remarketing list. So it's obviously smart enough to recognize, what do I know about this person? Oh, I know that they've been to your site before and know they're on a remarketing list, but it's not going to look at your RLSA bid mod. And we'll talk about RLSA when we do the deep dive into remarketing. Couple of tips, or a tip, I think, for Conversion Optimizer. This was a good one from one of the product leads at Google, who told me to not use budget to affect volume. So let's say you've got a campaign, it's running at $500 a day budget. It's, I don't know, maybe getting to the end of the month, you need to wind budgets down to hit this ridiculous target that your client has set, even when things are profitable. See, I don't like having budget limits. I think profitable things should be allowed to run unlimited. But anyway, old school marketing managers don't necessarily think the same way. Instead of winding budget down to spend less, use your target CPA instead. So use that target CPA, as I've said here, to adjust the volume of the traffic. If you wind the target CPA down, let's say from $20 down to, I don't know, 15 or maybe even 10 if you're being really aggressive, the volume will drop. You will naturally spend less, possibly a lot less. But Google's going to do everything it can to get you those conversions at that new target. And so volume's going to drop, total spend's going to drop. You get the same outcome as if you had pushed budgets down, but it's going to get you more conversions for that lower spend than it otherwise would. Likewise, if you want more volume, if you want to spend more, don't keep the target CPA the same and increase budget. Instead, raise your target CPA. Basically, give Google permission to go a little bit broader, to try and find new traffic, to go and show ads to more people. You're saying, yep, you can now spend $25 instead of 20. Go get me more of that. So use that, obviously assuming that your budget is high enough to allow that extra traffic in. Don't make changes to that campaign or whatever entity you're running this on more than every few weeks. That's a direct quote from the Google Help Center. It's vague as per everything in the Help Center. No surprise there. Don't make big changes. Technically, they say don't make huge changes. That is a direct quote as well. Now, what's a huge change? Well, they're very, very vague about this too. They actually call a small change, reading from the screen over here, he says, adding and removing keywords and changing creative and even changing the landing page, Google count as a small change. Now, again, that's going to depend on what the change was. So Google's saying, look, you don't have to do nothing on this campaign. You can add and remove a few keywords. That's okay. You can tweak your ad copy. It's not like you're not allowed to touch ad copy. But if you deleted all ads and loaded up a whole new series of ads, that would probably freak the machine out. Same with landing page. You can make changes to your landing page, is what I interpret that to mean. You can tweak things, you can change that image, you can change the headline a little bit. But if you were to use a completely different offer, a totally different thing on the landing page, then that's probably going to freak the machine out. Because if your conversion rate is going to change significantly, that's going to confuse things. And one slightly interesting thing to note is that it does weight recent data. Again, it doesn't give any guide as to what recent actually means. I reckon it's sort of 2 to 8 weeks. Just from all of the data I've seen, that's my best guess as to what it finds that most important, or let's say up to 8 weeks. It's not going to ignore yesterday's data, obviously, and start at 2 weeks, but the last few weeks, I think, is what it means by recent. So we can't talk about bidding without talking about bid adjustments. This is covered in AdWords Bootcamp 2015, but just to have everything in one place here, we'll just recap bid adjustments. This is the not particularly intuitive way of changing bids in your account, which hopefully you're familiar with already. You can increase or decrease bids by a percentage. So if you want to change a $10 bid to an $8 bid, you don't say bid this at 80% of what it was. You have to decrease by 20%. If you were to say bid this at 80%, that would probably end up being an increase by 80%, and you'd end up bidding $18. Everything that can have a bid adjustment can be in the range of plus 900% to minus 90%. And the exception to that, which caused a big stir when they introduced this 3 years ago, was that mobile is different to all the others, and it can only go up to plus 300% because they didn't want people creating essentially fake mobile-only campaigns. Long story. And that's the only one that can go down to minus 100%. In other words, you can turn mobile off using the wonderfully intuitive method of setting a bid decrease of minus 100%. You can set your bids at a geo level. 3 steps involved with this. Check dimensions report first, then add the locations, and then add the modifier. Let's walk through a little example because I think this is quite useful. I'm going to assume that this is not a massively high volume account, and therefore we're going to only look at the region level. So unless you've got tons and tons and tons of data, you're not going to bother using town or city because you're just not going to have enough statistically significant data to be able to make any decisions. So I've added region to my dimensions report. I've come into dimensions and I've got this data. And I'm going to focus, for the sake of argument, on Colorado right at the bottom of the screen. That was one of the good ones in the blue box. Oh, sorry, that was one of the bad ones in the blue box, the $18.19 CPA. And Nevada, a couple of lines up from there, one of the good ones at $6.62. So what bid mods would I apply to these locations? Well, first of all, I've got to look at the average. And the average in this case was $10.21. And so for Nevada, I take the average CPA, divide that by the CPA for my target entity, let's just say, so my CPA for Nevada in this case, divide one by the other, minus 1, and then times that by 100 to get a percentage. That gives me 54%. For Colorado, that was the expensive one, I've got $10.21 divided by $18.19, minus 1 times by 100, gets me a bid mod of minus 44%. So in other words, I need to decrease my bid by 44% for Colorado. Now to apply these bid mods, I have to go into my campaign settings. I go to my locations tab in there, and I find that I can't actually do them because this campaign was set to bid across the whole of the US, and I don't have bids for individual states yet. So the first thing I need to do is I need to go and edit the locations. So click on the big red Add Locations button. That gets you into the locations part of your main campaign settings. And now I can search for and add Colorado and Nevada in addition to the US. So I'm still bidding this across the whole of the states, adding Colorado and Nevada because they're inside the US. That's not going to affect the campaign as a whole. But you find now when I go back to that locations screen that I was on before, I now have those 3 locations listed here. And now in the bid adjustment column, I can add my bid adjustments that I calculated earlier on, plus 54 for Nevada, minus 44 for Colorado. Hopefully that all made sense. Device, again, you do that on the settings page, but then the devices subnav across the top there. Again, this is this is where you go if you want to turn mobile bids off. So this, I think, is still not widely used, even though this has been out for 3 years. I think a number of people running accounts still don't understand that they can change the bid on mobile or that they can turn mobile off. To turn mobile off at a campaign level, come in here and decrease that bid by 100%. That's how you do that. And time, you can see again under that sub navigation, this is just what it looks like, where you can set the day and time. You can do that in chunks. I think you can have up to 6 chunks of time per day, and you can set a bid adjustment for that. You need a lot of data in order to be able to do that. Use with caution. And the last one is RLSA, which I'm going to talk about more in a future webinar or recording when we do our deep dive into remarketing. And I'll go into more detail than I have to date around how to apply those bid adjustments for your remarketing audiences on your search campaigns. So RLSA, again, remarketing lists for search ads. And you can see here I've got a couple of different audiences applied to the same ad group and a couple of different bid adjustments. More about that later. We can't talk about bid adjustments without mentioning bid stacking. And bid stacking is this. Bid stacking is lots of different bid adjustments that all apply to the same keyword, which is kind of the opposite of Fred's bid buckets now that I think about it. Not mutually exclusive at all. So if we were to start with a $4 bid, so we've got a keyword, it's bid at $4. And then we've got all of these different bid adjustments that all apply to that same keyword. So it's in a campaign, for the sake of argument, which has a decrease by 20% bid adjustment for mobile. We know that Mondays have been really good for this particular account, so we've got a bid mod there to increase our bid triple on Mondays, plus 200%. We can also see that this person's searching from London. We know historically that's been really good, so we've got our geography bid mod there of plus 50%. And they're on a remarketing list. They've been to the site in the last 7 days, so we've got an RLSA bid adjustment of a plus 100% because we know that recent returning visitors tend to convert better, so we're going to spend more money on those. So the question then is, and have a little think about how you would do this before I show you the answer. What does that $4 bid turn into in this case? You've got 5 seconds, go. I'll have a drink of water. Where's my water gone? Got a number in mind? Awesome. So this is how you do it. $4 times by 0.8, because to apply a minus 20%, to apply a 20% drop, we multiply by 0.8 times by 3. That's what 200% turns into. Remember, plus 100% means to double, which would be times 2. So plus 200% is times 3. I know, not massively intuitive, is it? Plus 50% times 1.5, and then plus 100% for that RLSA list times 2. And that gives us a grand total of $28.80. So our $4 bid has now turned into a $28.80 bid. So you can imagine that if you've got a lot of bid mods applied, bid adjustments applied, then you can end up spending a lot. Now, the only saving grace with this is you can never go more than 10 times your original bid. So I said before that each rule had a maximum of plus 900%. So even when everything is stacked, Google won't allow you to go more than plus 900%. Thank you, Google. Only let my $4 bid turn into $40, but no more. So at least you can't end up bidding like $1,000 by mistake because you've got all of these high bid mods on. 10 times is the maximum. Last little bit, and then you're free, is Savvy number. So as I said before, this is a metric that I've come up with which allows us to measure the health of an account at a glance. I also mentioned before that maximizing profit is complicated rather than just being profitable. For more on that, take a look at this excellent blog post. I'm not going to go into that here, but this is a great blog post that you can go look at from the Rim Kaufman group. So grab that short code and go have a look at that blog post. Also have a look at this old video. This is 6 years old at this point, 2009. This was released by Hal Varian, chief economist over at Google. It's old, but it's a very, very good explanation of what I'm talking about here, which is incremental click cost and incremental conversion cost. And if you're doing this professionally, if you're running ads, you need to understand this. You may not use it on all your accounts because, like I say, it's complicated, but you need to understand what incremental click cost is, and Hal Varian has a fantastic explanation. 10 minutes of your life that is well worth doing. What Savvy number is an attempt to allow us to track that profit, but visually. I've said before that I think pictures beat numbers. Staring at a huge long list of numbers, yes, we're all very good at that in terms of being able to manage AdWords accounts. We're good at looking at numbers and reams of data. The average person is not. When you are presenting results back to your client and they're having to present it to the board, you don't want to give them a list of numbers and a list of percentages and a list of increases. You want to show them pictures and talk in terms of dollars, business impact. And so this is a little snapshot of an MCC level dashboard that we use. So we use a variety of scripts that run across the MCC, which create a Google Doc. So it's all free once you've got the script written. You don't have to pay additional money for something like Clipfolio or Dash This or anything like that. It just feeds, all these scripts feed into one master Google Doc that runs across everything in our MCC or our various MCCs. So the first column here, well, I'm not going to talk about, but that's just budget. So just to give you an idea, so we can track where these accounts are at compared to where they should be at if there is a budget limitation in place. But what we've done is to take this Savvy number and plot it over here on the right hand side so that I can see, is this account trending up? Is it flat? Is it getting horrible and trending down? And then I'll also look at where I'm currently at, although I actually use a moving average in here, but where I'm currently at compared to a week ago and compared to 4 weeks ago. And what I want to see, as we've got most of the time here, is double green. Double green means this is not only trending up from a week ago, but also trending up from 4 weeks ago. So how do we calculate Savvy number? Well, we talked about this a little bit right at the beginning, but we need to know the break-even point in order to calculate profit, or this sort of gross calculation for profit, a proxy, if you like, for profit. We need to understand break-even. Like I said right at the beginning, we've got a CPA of 10, a CPA of 20. We don't yet know if that's good or bad until we know that the break-even was either $15, what did I use, $20 I think I used before, or $100. If the break-even is $100, then we're quite fine to have a CPA of $20. And we don't mind CPA rising from $10 to $20 as long as the volume goes up when we do that. But you need to know break even. Once you know break even, then you can calculate Savvy number. So break even minus the CPA times by the volume of conversions or converted clicks we tend to use. As I mentioned before, we always use converted clicks. It's a more conservative measure of success. So you can pull all of that data. So you pull that every day for whatever entity you're looking at. So this could be the entire account, but you can also do this for individual campaigns, and if you have enough data, for individual ad groups and even individual keywords if you have tons of data. But let's just say for the entire account for now, we pull all of that data and then we plot that. But as you can see, it's pretty messy. And again, unless you have a ton of conversions, I mean lots and lots and lots every single day, then you're probably going to see a chart like this. This is very, very normal. And so to smooth this out, I used to do a bit of option trading back in the day. We played with moving averages a lot. And I'm amazed that Google don't use moving averages at all in the interface. But we do for this, because I think moving average is a really, really useful tool to help you see trends. That's kind of why they were invented. So if you plot a moving average over the top of this, that trend gets much more obvious. And so that's what the spark line that you saw before on the MCC level dash, the spark line is actually the moving average. So we only plot the moving average. You don't need to see the noisy data underneath. We just plot that moving average of Savvy number over time. Now the MCC level dashboard is not ready for prime time yet. There's a bunch of stuff that we need to change in there before I sell that, before I make that available. But what we are going to do is, for PPCSavvy members, is make the account level. So we're going to allow you to have a version of this. Now it's a little bit complicated, but since you've managed to watch all the way to the end of this massive presentation, essentially it's going to be account level. So you can give us a CID, a campaign ID number for an individual account. We'll add that to an MCC that we've created specifically for this purpose. The reason for doing that is I need to run the script at an MCC level, so that it applies to everything beneath, everything in that MCC. So your individual account, not an MCC. We'll link that into our MCC. We run the script at the MCC level, and then that will create a pretty awesome looking dashboard, give you some useful stats and some trends like this, including Savvy number for that particular account, and then we'll give you access to your own Google Doc. So that's one URL that will stay consistent over time. You've got one Google Doc that you just go in and check every day or every week, however often you want to do that. You could have a team member check that for you and check for things like disapproved ads or how much spend was yesterday, how's Savvy number tracking. That's all on that dashboard, which is going to be a $50 product, and we've decided to almost give that away, but sell that to you as a PPCSavvy member. That's going to be $9 a month, and there's a bunch of stuff coming as well. So what you're going to get access to very, very soon is only version 1 of that. I've got a ton more stuff that I want to add in there. And if you're an agency savvy, if you've bought Agency Savvy, whether you're in the mastermind or you've just bought the course, then you get the dashboard for free as part of your Agency Savvy purchase. So all of that's coming. Don't have a picture of the dashboard to show you yet, but it's coming very, very soon. You'll have access to that before Christmas. Recording this in November 2015. So thank you for your attention. Hopefully you now understand bidding in a lot more detail. You've got a lot to think about, I'm sure, in terms of how you might use bid buckets or how you're going to apply the flexible bid strategies. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. And if you have any questions, as always, post them in the forum on PPCSavvy. Cheers for now. Bye.